What's going on, you guys? Your boy, the informant. I'm back with another video. So before I get into this video, I actually want to address this because what I just saw was pretty much Ben Crump come out, and it almost looks as if Ben Crump is actually going up against the NAACP because the NAACP, as we all know, has just accepted $50 million from Wells Fargo. While on the other hand, we have Ben Crump over here saying that Wells Fargo is discriminating against African Americans and other groups, but I'm going to keep it primarily on African Americans, that they're discriminating against African Americans. Now, how can Ben Crump be over here fighting Wells Fargo? Why, on the other hand, we have the NAACP giving them a pretty much a clapping hand, patting them on the back. Now, I'm gonna play for you guys this news clip. I'm gonna get back to my commentary.
Civil rights attorney Ben Crump in Atlanta today, joining other attorneys in a lawsuit against Wells Fargo, claiming discriminatory mortgage practices. At today's conference, attorneys highlighted the pattern of racial discrimination experienced by several Black customers. They say customers were discriminated at every single point in the mortgage lending process, including denying loans, especially if they lived in predominantly Black communities. They also claim if they were approved, it was at a higher interest rate, costs, and fees.
What those citizens were saying is, you beat us down, but we're not going to let you beat us. And that's what we're saying. Wells Fargo, do right by these citizens. Do right by these Black people who have been loyal.
Attorneys are calling for Wells Fargo shareholders to approve a labor union motion for an independent racial equity audit and for mayors nationwide to freeze business with the bank.
Okay, so after that news clip, you kind of see what Ben Crump and the other lawyers were talking about, pretty much the discrimination practices that's happening inside of the Wells Fargo's wall. Now, on the other hand, we have the NAACP who just accepted $50 million from Wells Fargo to advance racial equity, right? So racial equity, I mean racial pretty much monetary gains or something like that. So while on the front of this hustle between the NAACP and the Wells Fargo, it may look good to some of you guys, but let me tell you guys, this is not actually a good thing that's happened between the Wells Fargo and the NAACP, because the $50 million will actually not address the racial equity, but because they're the NAACP, they're a Black organization, them getting this money, it looks like they're advancing racial equity between the Black community and other communities. But like let me just say this: it's a hustle, you guys. Them accepting this $50 million, it means nothing in the grand scheme to the Black community, and I'm going to explain to you guys why. So while NAACP is accepting this $50 million, Black people, as you heard from Ben Crump, are getting discriminated at the local branches. And what this is going to end up happening is Black people are actually going to be paying for that $50 million to the NAACP, and we're also going to be overpaying by giving more money to Wells Fargo because of the malpractices that's happening at Wells Fargo. Now, before I go into deep into this conversation, I actually want to play for you guys another clip from our friend Roland Martin, who actually exposed the NAACP for their hustle between the Wells Fargo and NAACP. And I was actually surprised to hear him call out the NAACP on the Breakfast Club, but he tried to do it in a mild manner where he seems trying to be respectful. But if you listen to what he actually says, it's a hustle that's happening between the Wells Fargo and the NAACP, and it's going to be on the backs of African Americans. So let me play that clip for you guys right now.
The NAACP, National Action Network, Rainbow Push Coalition, and others. Those institutions have to say, all right, a donation to us is great, but it's marginal. Okay. So Wells Fargo was the presenting sponsor of the NAACP Image Awards. Okay, that's fine. That's great. But the question is, how much money did Black people lose during the home foreclosure crisis as a result of the business practices of Wells Fargo? I guarantee you it's far more what the donation was.
So after listening to that clip from Roland Martin and Ben Crump, one has to beg the question. I actually want to ask you guys this question: who can give Black people a better economic opportunity? Will it be Wells Fargo if they would stop their discriminatory practices within their walls, or is it the NAACP who just got $50 million from Wells Fargo? Well, let me go into details about that $50 million that they just got. So the NAACP has actually put out what they're going to plan on doing with that $50 million, and you're going to be so surprised. You're going to be very surprised that it's not going to help you whatsoever. What they're going to do is expand their local branches, their programming, their staff, and advance strategic partnership. In a statement put out by Derrick Johnson, it says these funds are going to go directly towards the strengthening of the NAACP grassroots network of local units and branches across all 50 states, as well as the work of a national NAACP. So in other words, we're going to keep the money to ourselves. We're going to fuel our bureaucracy, which is called the NAACP, and we're going to continue pushing this narrative of the NAACP helping Black people. But this money is not going to hit the Black people on the ground and help them in their everyday lives. So what I'm saying, in other words, is that the NAACP is not going to do anything on the ground for African Americans. They're not going to help African Americans gain economical gains or hardly any social gains. The NAACP is instead going to use the money in a bureaucratic action to fund their own projects and circle the money within. Usually, these type of circling within is them hiring their family, their friends, associate, and getting some volunteers who have the time of day. The NAACP, when they took the $50 million and put out this explanation, failed to say how they're going to help Black people on the ground, how they're going to help Black business, and so on. But this actually tells me that the NAACP will actually circulate that money within its own organization and continue to pretend to be the front people for racial equity and racial economic advancement. Also, I want to take time to recognize that NAACP, when they took this money, they knew they were pulling the wool over the Black community's head, because even in their explanation, they could not tell you how this is going to help racial equity. We're talking about racial equity. We're not talking about racial justice. We're talking about equity. We're talking about money. Them receiving $50 million is not going to do anything for the Black community, because they don't even plan on spending that money in the Black community. They plan on circulating within that big bureaucratic organization called the NAACP. Now I'm going to bring up this article right here. And as you can see in the article, hopefully you can read that. It says Wells Fargo will pay $7.8 million to settle the Labor Department allegations of hiring discrimination against women and Black workers, pretty much. And this actually goes into what I'm saying. Wells Fargo discrimination and bad practices. The African American race is actually going to pay for that $50 million that they just gave to the NAACP. With the higher fees, the higher interest rates, the subprime loan, and denied opportunities of loans and denied opportunities of being hired by Wells Fargo, Black folks are actually losing way more than that measly $50 million that NAACP just got. Now I'm going to actually give you guys three scenarios in which happened, which I'm going to leave the links in there. Now, in one scenario, besides the article I just showed you, during the COVID-19 pandemic prompted a historic interest rate low. You guys should know about this by now. Now, it also alleges that the clients at Wells Fargo, on average, that the Black applicants, even with good credit, they had higher interest rates than their counterpart white people, right? In scenario two, $175 million in relief for homeowners was resolved by the Department of Justice to Wells Fargo because of the discrimination that they were showing towards Black and Hispanic people. So Wells Fargo, in that scenario, they had to actually pay $175 million, and you actually can find that in the link I put in the description. You can actually read about that. That's with the Department of Justice. So we're talking about the big boys up here. And last, scenario three, homeowners who had their homes appraised by Wells Fargo. Black homeowners who had their homes appraised by Wells Fargo, their homes was appraised for lesser than was actually evaluated for by other entities. So when Wells Fargo come to your house, they're going to say, okay, your house is only worth 100,000. But if you get somebody else to come to your house, they're going to say, okay, your house is worth 190,000. And right there, people lose the equity within their houses. So Wells Fargo is hitting Black people all across the head, in the back, in the neck, and all of that. But on the other hand, they have the NAACP to say, okay, no, 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 they're not discriminating against Black people. Look what they just did for us. You know what I'm saying? So in closing, Wells Fargo and the NAACP have played a chess move on the Black community. Wells Fargo, who is facing many discrimination cases, is now using the NAACP to say they're not discriminating. And since the NAACP supports them, Black folks shouldn't just ignore this. You know what I'm saying? Because it's obvious of what's going on. And pretty much it's like having a blue check mark in the Black community when you have the NAACP supporting you. The NAACP can pretty much say, we like when Jim Clyburn said, "I know Joe Biden." The NAACP can say, "Oh, we know Wells Fargo, and we know their heart and their mind and what they want to do for the Black community and all that good stuff." So therefore, the NAACP getting the $50 million means absolutely nothing to the economic advancement for Black folks. Instead, it's just a symbolic gesture, and the NAACP are going to use this money to open up more symbolic justice in the form of the National NAACP office, which means you have someone else to go to and complain to at the end of the day when something actually happens to you, and you're pushed out of your neighborhood and pushed out of your home and so on. So you just get somebody else to complain to what they're going to do with that money. So they're going to open up a national chapter. So pretty much you have somebody else to go complain to. And now, for me, I'm 100% sure that this national level of the NAACP is just going to become another Democratic ran front group, another campground to get black people to go vote for the Democrats. See, you would think that the NAACP they would be focused on stopping discrimination and helping the average black person every day. However, instead of stopping discrimination within Wells Fargo's walls, they accepted a check from Wells Fargo in exchange to stay quiet about what's actually happened and to support Wells Fargo. So when they went to the table, they could have said, "Okay, you need to stop all your discriminatory practices that's happening within your walls." They could have did any of this, or they said, we're not going to take that $50 million." No, they didn't do that. They were looking out for themselves, not for the racial equity of black people, which is the whole point of this conversation in which I'm having. The hustle is plain and clear to me, and I hope it is to you guys, is that the NAACP to try to claim that they're helping black people financially when Wells Fargo is actually robbing customers, and the organizations like NAACP will play along as long as the money keeps rolling in for the NAACP. So even though they claim to be helping equity and economic empowerment, the truth of the matter is that the only people that the NAACP at this point is helping with that $50 million, as they put out in their statement, is themselves. So so in closing, I want to ask you guys this question right here, because who should black folks actually blame for this? Now, when did it all fall apart for the NAACP? Because we remember the NAACP coming out for black folks back in the day, and it was an organization that actually put up fists and hands, and it'll take their enemies to the mud. But now, when you look at the NAACP, we got to look around and say, who are we going to blame for how they're behaving and all that? You know what I mean? Like, when did the NAACP go to being a brawler to a fairy tale in a dress? Now, I have my theories, but I had to ask you guys. Was it when the NAACP was invaded by cowards? Was it when we bent the knee to the Democratic Party? Was it when black folks lowered their standard and we allowed people like that guy Amos in the NAACP to represent us? See, like me, I don't actually know. And I hope you guys can actually leave a comment and let me know when you guys think that the NAACP failed. Therefore, moving forward, as we look at these organizations who wants to represent black people and black people interests, we need to higher our standards and really evaluate who's leading these organizations. Look at their background, look at all this stuff, because the people who said they represent us, they don't represent any of your interests, but they're out here speaking on you. And this is who CNN, MSNBC will give an interview to, and they're going to be like, "Oh, we're speaking on behalf of all black people," when in fact they only speak for maybe 1 or 2% of black people, the 1 or 2% that they want to put as the head Negroes in front of the black population. The I'll get them boss boys, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world. These are these coons who, I don't care if you're in front of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or whatever. You're just a coon performing for a job, and you're going to keep that money rolling in, even though it's going to roll over 100 black people. At least you're getting paid. That's who we have running the NAACP right now, and I think it's up to black people to higher their standards when it comes to this. So when you guys see these people stop on Amos or whatever his name is, over there in California, you need to look around and see who else in the NAACP is doing wrong by black people and call that shit out. We have to call that out, and we have to keep calling it out, because we won't get fairness and justice unless we continue to call these people out for the cowards they are. Now, thanks for tuning in, you guys, man. Stay informed.